dish that we're going to prepare, the wild rice, the starch that's going to go with our deer dish. So we're going to do a wild rice pilaf. I've created chicken stock the night before. You could just use some water if you want, or you can go to a grocery store and buy some stock. It's your choice. I had some chicken left over, chicken bones, made a chicken stock. I'm going to use that. So I'm going to start by heating that up. I want to bring that up to a simmer just to help the timing of our rice. I'm also going to use that stock to rehydrate some morel mushrooms. So one thing that's great about living in this area is one of the first things that starts to pop up are morel mushrooms and asparagus. So I'm going to be using those together today. I'll do some grilled asparagus and some mushrooms, morel mushrooms in our wild rice pilaf. One of the instructors I work with right now, he's foraging, going out and finding morels after fire season. And then our oven is being used right now as a dehydrator constantly. So I know that next semester, I will have some morels on my menu. So the first thing I want to do for my wild rice pilaf is to start my stock heating up. So I've got 4 cups or a liter of stock heating up. And then I'm also going to start getting my pot ready to create my pilaf. So a heavy bottomed pot with a lid that fits over it so we can steam our rice. I am going to add to that another neutral oil, so some avocado oil, some olive oil, grapeseed oil, whatever you want to use, but a good splash of that because we're going to sweat off some onion as well as the rice. So my stock has come up to a simmer, so I'm going to turn the heat off, and to it I'm going to add half of a cup of dried morel mushrooms. I'm just going to rehydrate these, and also the flavor of the mushrooms is going to impart into the stock. So basically like making a tea, I'm going to put those mushrooms in there, turn it off, put the top off, and let those steep for a good 10 to 15 minutes till they rehydrate and also flavor the broth there. While that's happening, I'm going to take an onion, just one small onion, and just like I did with my shallot, I'm going to take off the top of the onion, the part that goes up to the sky, cut it into the half, take the skin off, and then I'm going to small dice this onion and then sweat that in the oil to start building flavors for our rice. By sweating it, I'm going to use a medium-low heat to take out some of the astringency, the harshness of the onion, and make it translucent without adding any color to it. So we're just caramelizing sugars. We are breaking down the onion, making it sweeter, making it softer, and taking out some of those notes that we wouldn't want add too much bitterness or sharpness to the dish. You could use any onion that you wanted to. I like to use these white onions because they're a little sweeter and they add a nice flavor to it. Okay, so I've got my oil heating up. I'm going to add a couple of tablespoons, 3 tablespoons of butter, and I'm going to start melting that off. And then to that, I'm going to add my 1 small diced onion. I have my stock steeping my mushrooms. They have just about to sink, so they're looking pretty good. So I'm just going to wait till my butter comes up, and then I'm going to add in my onions and start sweating those off to break them down and sweeten them up. So I'm going to remove the mushrooms from my chicken stock, and then I'm just going to rough chop these up, and then I'll put those in with our rice. So when I come up with recipes or when I'm cooking, I like to look what's in season and what's available, and that you usually find items that go together, grow together, or are in season together, like strawberries and rhubarb and morels and asparagus, which I find, especially with these mushrooms and on this nice cool day, that by the time I get them out of the hot stock, they don't really retain their heat very much. So they felt quite cool for me to work with. So we're lucky enough to have Heffley Lake Farms just down the road, or Heffley Farms. So right now we've got radishes, we've got asparagus, we've got mushrooms growing. I've got rhubarb from my parents' garden. There's some herbs growing around here. They've got some leaf lettuces. So just finding what was available helps to write my menus. Some strawberries. I had to go and find some strawberries from a little bit farther away because with all this cool weather and all the rain, our strawberries are a little behind schedule right now. But usually, again, if it grows together, if around the same season, that's usually things that will go well together. So my onions are sweating. They're looking translucent now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some wild rice. You can buy this in 250 gram bag. So I created the recipe based off the 250 gram bag. Just going to take this and I'm going to sweat it pilaf method. So pilaf is a method where we sweat off our aromatics or onions. You could add peppers to it. Anything hearty, you could add some shallots, some garlic to it. And then we sweat off our rice. That'll help to also create nice individual rice granules. And then we add our hot stock to that. We cover it and then we cook it slowly, either in an oven or over a burner. And that will help just the moisture will reduce into the rice. It'll soften it and it'll all kind of cook together in one form. So onions are translucent. I'm going to add my rice to the pot here. I'm going to cook this for an additional 2 to 3 minutes. And then I've got my hot stock here and I've got my mushrooms. I'll add those all together. Cover it, cook on low heat. It'll probably take about 30 minutes. Also with this recipe, you'll find that different wild rices absorb differently. So you may find that you might have to remove some of the liquid or take off the top and reduce it down to get the consistency right. Or you might even need to add a little bit more stock or hot water to the dish as well to get the texture of the rice that you're looking for. If you're using dry herbs, it's okay to add it at the beginning of the dish when I add my stock, or even steep the herbs into the stock and add it. But if we're working with fresh herbs, we just want to finish it at the end, especially with things like parsley, rosemary, where it'll either turn black or it'll cook. You could add a little bit of dried herbs at the beginning to add some flavor to it, and then at the end finish it with fresh herbs to get this different levels of herb as well into your dish. I'm going to add my chicken stock with infused mushrooms. I'm going to turn down the temperature. I'm going to add my mushrooms. Give it a good stir, and then on low heat, it's going to let everything cook down together. Throw a lid on it and forget it for a while. So what I'm going to do is take a little bit of rosemary, just pull that off the hard woody stem, chop that up, and then also when I'm chopping my herbs, I kind of want to use as much of the blade as possible, not just go straight down. I want to use that blade to cut through the herbs and not bruise them. So with my parsley, I just like to bundle it up, get it together, and then using a sharp knife, and then I will add that to the rice. I'm going to stir it together. I'm going to do a grilled deer chop. You could also do this with a lamb chop as well, or a lamb loin chop that you can buy in most grocery stores today. Every year, like my uncle in Williams Lake will catch a deer around October, November, and he will phone me up and ask me if I want some. One of the great things about my uncle catching a deer is the stories that he tells me. It's not just, do you want deer? It's, I caught this deer in this place. It was close to the truck. It was a clean shot. It was a great day, but there's usually a story behind it instead of just getting that meat that he gives me. And then anytime I cook it, I'll hear the story over again and another time. So it's a lot more connection to the dinner that we're having than just going to a grocery store and picking up some meat. So the first thing I want to do is create a sweet and sour sauce. So I'm going to do a reduction of red wine vinegar and sugar and a little bit of balsamic and honey. And then I'm going to add some sour cherries. I got a sour cherry tree in my backyard. So these were harvested last year. They've been pitted and frozen. So you could just use sour cherries, or you could use, I find Bing cherries are common in frozen section at your grocery store. Or you could use different fruit as well, whatever you have available at the time. So first of all, I'm going to start off by sweating a shallot. I'm going to take half of a shallot, cut the top off. So there's two sides to an onion or a shallot. One side that grows up to the sky, the other side that grows down into the ground. I like to call it the little goatee. So I'm going to keep that goatee on there because that's going to help hold the product together. So when I dice it, I'll end up with little waste, and it'll make it a lot easier for me to cut. And take my half of a shallot, and I'm going to slice around the shallot. And while I'm doing this, I'm going to start heating up my pot for the gastrique, or the reduction. I'm also going to add neutral oil. I've got avocado here. You could use grapeseed oil. You could use a canola oil, just something that's got a high smoking point that's not going to smoke and cause astringency to your dish there. So I'm just going to add a little bit of oil to my pot. And then I'm going to finish julienning my shallot. So now that I've sliced it crosswise, I'm going to go against it. So I'm left with a nice consistent cut, and I only have this little nub on my shallot. I'm going to add my shallot to this. So I'm going to add a couple of tablespoons of balsamic. And then I'm also going to add a 1/4 cup of honey. And in with my shallots. I'm going to bring that up till everything comes together. Then I'll add my cherries in and cook them out and reduce them. So my sweet and sour sauce is reduced down to a syrup consistency. I'm just going to place it on some ice to cool it down quickly. Otherwise, I just let it come to room temperature and then cool it in the fridge. But we're working outdoors today. So I have here some deer chops, which I'm going to prepare. They're pretty much all ready to go. I'm just going to take off some of the excess of fat, because what will happen is as it hits the grill, it'll scorch, the fat will render down and induce flames, and it'll burn the meat. So also, this is a product, it's a lamb chop. It's almost like a lamb T-bone, and this goes really well with all the herby terroir notes of the dish that we have going on here. So I'll just trim up a little bit of that fat and discard it. And then I'm just going to put neutral oil, again, like a canola oil. Grapeseed oil works really good. It's got a really high smoke point because we're going to be cooking this at quite a high heat on the grill. Avocado oil is starting to show up a lot more, and it's having some good success as a good smoke point oil and a healthy oil. And then to this, I'm going to add just a little bit of avocado oil. We want just enough to coat, because we need that medium. So on the grill, if you just have these dry, it'll burn, it'll scorch. But with this oil, what it'll do is it'll caramelize, and it'll build the sugars, the sugars, the natural sugars, the protein of the meat will caramelize and create a lot of flavors, that smoky, roasty notes there. So I'm just going to lightly coat the deer chops and the lamb chops with the oil. And then I'm going to add just a little bit of Montreal steak spice. And what I found, for most people have a Montreal steak spice or a steak spice kicking around in their cupboards. So it works as a great marinade or a great seasoning for our deer and our lamb. So just a nice light coat, and then I will evenly season. Then I'll put this into the fridge. It helps if you let it sit for a good hour, just to let the spices adhere to the meat. So I'm just going to pop this into the fridge overnight, or for at least an hour, just to help build those flavors. So depending on the doneness to your liking, I'm going to cook these off. I want them to be around 135 degrees when they finish off, kind of between 130 and 140 ideally. So I want to pull them off usually around 118 to 125, because we're going to get at least a 10 degrees carryover cooking. So after they come off the grill, they will continue to cook and they will rise in temperature. I also want to make sure that after they come off, I let them rest for at least 5 minutes. So what's happening is after they come off the high hot grill, I've got this one about just over 625 degrees. If you think about science class, the liquid, when it's cooking, it's going to be moving really quickly when it's hot. So we want to slow it down. When the liquid slows down, it redistributes within the meat and it doesn't go everywhere. If I cut this while it's hot, those juices that are moving really quickly will end up on the plate, on the pan, not where we want them in the meat, so it'll dry out quicker. So give your meat that time to rest, redistribute, and cool down so it doesn't bleed everywhere or juice everywhere. So this grill is sitting about 625 degrees. We're going to open it up. I'm going to use a little bit of pan release just to season my grill. And then I've got a really hot side and a side that's a little bit lower. I'm going to start it on an angle and the hot side here, and I'm going to cook it. Because this is a bone-in product, it'll take a little bit longer than a bone-out. The bone-in also gives it a little bit more flavor. Start on an angle, and then in a couple of minutes I'll give it a 45-degree turn. That'll help to set my grill marks. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side. It should take, ideally, I'm guessing, about 4 to 6 minutes total to get this cooked off. If your meat is ready, it's to use a digital thermometer, getting it right into the middle, into the thickest part. We also have to worry about this one with the bone because it could be a little colder next to the bone, so I want to kind of get it into the thickest part close to the bone but not touching the bone. So with our dish, with our deer and our sour cherry sweet and sour, we're going to serve it with some asparagus, which is in season. I always love asparagus. Growing up in Clearwater, we had asparagus growing on our property, so this was always a great time of year. We could go out into the backyard, pick it off, just eat it straight off the vine, nice and sweet. So asparagus is readily available right now. Also thought I would blister off some cherry tomatoes as well that would go with the deer or the lamb and our rice pilaf. So I'm just going to check my asparagus. Just take a look where it breaks, kind of find where the woody bit is, where it gets tender, kind of use that as a guide, and I'm just going to trim up the rest of the stalks. And then I'm going to put them into a pan and just toss them with a little bit of oil. We lived in a climate that had very distinctive seasons, so realizing that pickling, preserving, dehydrating, smoking, curing, drying, all these things that we could do while the product was available to set us up for the winter, so we had a product at its peak, preserved and ready for us during the winter and the colder months. And then I'm just going to take some of these tomatoes. I've got different colors here, some red ones, some yellow ones, and some purple ones. Just a light drizzle, and coat those. And then just a little bit of salt and pepper. And asparagus going on the grill, hot grill. A grilled deer chop and a grilled lamb chop with wild rice pilaf with morel mushrooms, some grilled local asparagus, cherry tomatoes, and then a sour cherry sweet and sour sauce from my backyard. Bon appetit.